Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, and Netflix. These are the top tech companies in the world, and every engineer aspires to work at these companies. But what sort of questions are asked during the technical rounds? Well, we bring you this new video on FANG interview questions so that you get an idea of the type and the complexity of questions that are being asked during the interviews.
Hi guys, in this video let's talk about a problem, different bits sum pairwise. So this problem is also by the name Hamming distance. So basically it was asked in Google, in one of the interviews of Google. So let's see what the problem says. So we define f of xy. F is a function that takes two parameters x and y. So it defines as the number of different corresponding bits in binary representation of x and y. So f of 27 is equal to 2. How? So 2's representation in binary is this and 7's representation is this, and both of these numbers differ at 2 bit positions, right? So they differ at 2 bit positions. So first is this and second is this, right? So therefore the answer is 2. Now you are given an array of n positive integers from a1 till an. So you have to find the sum of f of ai comma aj for all pairs I and j such that ij lies between 1 to n, and you have to return the answer modulo 10 to the power 9 plus 7. Right? So basically you are given, in this case if you'll see, you're given 1, 3 and 7. So basically what you have to do, you have to find f of 1, 1. How will we find f of 1, 1? So it's nothing but represented 1 in this form. Then again, how many bits differ? No bit, right? So it will give us 0. Now what about f of 1, 3? So this is 1, right? And 3 is this. So there is just one position at which both numbers differ. So therefore it will give us 1. What about 1 and 5? So I have 1 and 5 is there. So there is again just one bit position at which they differ. So again it will give me 1. Now I have to find for 1 and 5 and 1 separately, right? That means they are counted different. Okay. And also I have to find for 1 and 1, 5 and 5, 3 and 3, so I'm talking about this particular array. So basically if I have some I and j, then I have to calculate for both I, j and ji. They considered separate, as well as I have to calculate for I and I as well, right? So now let's see what we can do about this problem. So the brute force approach says that we can pair up every element and find number of different pair of bits, right? So basically I can pair up every element, right? So I can have 1, 1. So what are the pairs? So these pairs are already written: 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1, 3, 3. So I'll take them separately and then I'll go over their bits, and then I'll find that okay, they differ at these many positions, and I'll return. So if I'm pairing up every other element with every other element, so I'll get the time complexity of order of n square. But let's see if we can do better than this. So let's talk about the optimized version. For that, let's build some intuition. So basically, we are saying that we want to count the number of ones, right? So basically, we want to count the number of bits that differ, right, at every place. So I have, let's say, I places. So I have 0, 1, 2, 3. These many places are there in some number. So I have right now my array is, let's say, so let me erase all of this. Let's say my array is 135 only right now. And so here I have 001, here I have 011, and here I have 105. So that, 101. So basically, what I have to do, I have to check key okay for every pair. I have to check key at what ith positions the bit differ. So I want to check that if at some position bits differ or not. Now how can I check that? So basically if I find the XOR and if I get 0, I know that means the bit positions are same. That means the bits are same, right? So bits are same, but that is not of my use, right? So I want to find where bits are different. So basically bits will be different, 0, 1 or 1, 0, when my XOR will be 1, right? When my XOR will be 1. So I'll be trying to XOR the bits and I'll look that how many ones are there, right? So if I would have given, let's say, 0 and 1 only, so if this is only my number and the binary representation of them will be this only, right? So now I'll simply XOR it and I'll get 1 and I'll simply return 1. But now let's say I have 0, so I have only single 0, but now I have, let's say, 3 ones. Okay, I have 3 ones, so 3 ones are there. So I'll do what now? So I know that one pair of 0 and 1 will give me 1 bit. It'll tell me that if there is one pair which is 0 and 1, it'll contribute to 1 bit, right? That it differs by 1 bit. So now it was included for one pair. So here I have 1 0 and let's say 3 ones. So what I'll do now? So I'll associate the 0 with 1. So now I know I want to find the different bits. So I'll be pairing up a different bits, right? I'll be pairing up 0 1, right? 0 and 0 and 1 and 1 won't be of use to me. So I'll be pairing the 0 with this one, then the 0 with this one, then the 0 with this one. Essentially, what am I doing? I am trying to find the number of zeros, how many number of zeros are there, and I'll simply multiply it with the number of ones that are there, right? So I'll simply wait a minute. So I'll simply multiply it with the number of ones that are there, right? So basically, if I have 3 zeros and 2 ones, so what I'll be doing? I'll be associating every 3 zeros. I'll be associating all the 3 zeros with all the ones, right? I'll be doing this, isn't it? So I'll be associating all of them. So essentially, I'm multiplying. So 3 into 2, that means 6. 6 times they'll be associated, and that means 6 number of ones will be there, right? So essentially, now what can we do? Instead of forming the pairs, I was given 1 3 5. Instead of forming the separate pairs, right? Instead of forming the separate pairs, what I can do is I can simply represent them in binary form. So what I'll get for 1 I'll get 0 0 1. For 3 I'll get 0 1 1. Then for 5 I'll get 1 0 1, right? So what I can do is I can simply go to every bit position and I can count the number of ones and number of zeros. Then I can simply multiply them up, because each of those pair will be contributing 1, right? They'll be contributing 1 to the answer. So I have this ith bit as 0 1 2. So let's see with the example. Okay, let's see with the example. So basically, let's consider the bit position 1. Okay, let's consider this part. Let me change the color. So let's consider this part, right? So I have 0 1 and 0. So if I were taking them separately, so let's say if I were considering 1 and 3, so ith bit of 1, so 1th bit of 1 and 3 is nothing but it's a 0 and 3 is 1, right? So now it will give me the XOR of 1. That means these bits differ, right? And if I'll be taking for, let's say, 1 and 5, so here I have 0 and in 5 I have 0, so they give me 0 because they don't differ. Now if I have 3 and 5, so here 3 is 1 and 5 is 0, so they give me 1. That means they differ. So since I'm associating every 0 with every 1, so I'll simply count the number of, at every ith position, I'll simply count the number of ones and number of zeros. So here my number of zeros is 2 and my number of ones is 1. So I'll simply do 2 into 1. That will give me 2. Now I also have to multiply it by 2, because since I'm considering just not 1 and 3, but I'll be considering 3 and 1 also, right? So therefore they'll give me same result, right? So I'll simply multiply it by 2. So I'll be calculating for this bit position, whatever be my answer, then I'll be adding it to this bit position, whatever be my answer, then I'll be adding to this bit position. So essentially I'll be adding all the answers bitwise. I'll be checking all the answers bitwise. So let's see the pseudocode for this. So pseudocode goes something like this. So basically, I have defined my mod because I have to do mod the answer with this. at the end. So I'm given an array A, right? That will have the numbers that I have to find the Hamming distance for. So initially my answer is at 0. Now I have kept a count for counting the number of zeros and number of ones, right? So here I have a count variable. So my I will traverse to all the bit positions. So I am considering here that my integer is of 32 bit, right? So I will be iterating to all the 32 bits, right? So it will start from the 0th position and it will be moving to most significant bit position, right? So from 0 to 31 I'll be going. Then my count is initially 0, and then I'll be iterating over my array, given array, right? Then simply I'll be checking that what all bits are set. So in case of 1, right, so its 0th bit is set. So this will essentially give me what? This will give me, so AJ in this case is 001, let's say. So I have 1, 3 and 5 with me. So let's say AJ in this case is nothing but 1, and 1 left shifted by I, that means 1 left shifted by, so this shouldn't have, no, it's right. So basically I is 0, right? So 1 left shifted by 0, it gives me what? It gives me 1 only, right? So I'll have this. Now it will give me 1, that means this bit position is set in this number, so it will give me true, and I'll simply count. Now my count becomes 1, right? So I'll simply iterate it over for all the elements. Now I'll go for my j will become 1, and I'll be going to 3. So now I'll check that, okay, 3 is this, and again 1 left shifted by 0, it'll give me 1 only, right? So I'll get 001, and again this will give me what? This will give me 1, that means this bit is set. So this will return me true, and I'll simply increment my count to 2. Right, and at the end of iterating all these elements, after checking the unit positions bit, right, then I have my count of the number of ones, right, and the count of the number of zeros will be nothing but a number of elements that are there in the array minus the count. So that will give me the count of the number of zeros. And since we have seen previously that if I multiply them together, then I'll be associating every zero with every one, and that will give me the set bit, right? And I'll be multiplying that with 2 because I'll be considering ij as well as ji separately, right? And then I'll be adding that to my answer, and I'll also be doing the modding it with the mod, which is here I have taken, and then I'll simply return my answer. So this is the approach, and the complexity is going to be nothing but this loop will run for 32 times, so it's going to be 32, and this loop will run for the number of elements in the array times, so that means n, so it's going to be 32 into n. So thank you so much.
Hey guys, in this video we are going to discuss the problem permutations, right? So what the problem says is that given a collection of numbers, what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to return all the possible permutations that can be originated from the given collection of numbers. And for this particular problem, what you can assume is all the elements are going to be unique. Okay, so let's say the given example is 1, 2, 3. So here you can see that there are 3 unique elements. So the possible number of permutations are going to be 3 factorial. And the permutations are going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2 and 3, 2, 1, right? So let's see that how we can solve the problem. In the given respective answer, you are supposed to return all the possible permutations as well. So a simple observation that we can make here is to make the permutation of any given set. What we can assume is there are n spots, right? There are going to be n spots. And at each spot, we will be having how many choices? We will be having, for the first spot, we will be having n choices. For the second spot, we will be having n minus 1 choices. For the third spot, we will be having n minus 2 choices, and so on, right? And if we have n choices for the first position, then can we say that in all the permutations, there will be some permutations in which this 1 is going to be the first character, or let's say the first element. In some permutations, this 2 is going to be the first element. and in some permutations this 3 is going to be the first element, right? Okay, so as we have total n elements and there can be n choices for the first spot, we can say that in our solution what we will try to do, we will just try to make sure that every element in the given collection of numbers is getting a chance to become the first element of our given permutation. And as soon as we have solved the problem for this first position, what we can say is we will just recursively boil down the whole problem for the rest of the position, that is this much part, and we will try to just update the problem in similar manner. So let's see what I'm trying to say. So here you can see that this is a recursion tree which we can just observe for our given permutation problem. So here you can see that the given inputs were 1, 2, 3. Now even 1, 2 as well as 3, all these three numbers will be given a chance to become the first element of our given permutation. We will just pass a corresponding given array along with this given input array. This array will be keeping our final answers, right? So let's say that firstly we will try that, okay, 1 is going to be our first element of the permutation. Then we'll try that, okay, 2 is going to be the first element, and then 3 is going to be the first element. If I say that 1 is going to be the first element of my given permutation, then the problem boiled down to the fact that, okay, we need to find all the permutations of 2, 3 that is going to start with 1. If I say that 2 is going to be the first position element, then the problem boiled down to the fact that we are going to find all the permutation of 1, 3 and start all of them by 2. Similarly, all the permutation of 1, 2 and start them by 3. Okay. Now we will just try to map the bigger problem to the smaller subproblem as well. That, okay, in the permutations of 2, 3, once we will have a choice that 2 can be the part of the first position or 3 can be the part of the first position. So if 2 is going to the part of the first position, we will find all the permutations of 3, and in all those permutations we will append 1, 2. How 1, 2? Because this 1 was coming from the original bigger problem, and this smaller subproblem of 2, 3 says that, okay, whatever permutation I was going to build, the last character is going to be 2 here. So the original prefix will be 1, 2. Similarly here it will be 1, 3, and we will try to find all the permutations of 2, so on and so forth for each element of this corresponding subtree. Similarly, we will go one level more deep, and here you can see we have only one element, so we will make only one choice, that is for 3, here for 2, again for 3, for 1, for 2 and for 3, and we'll just append that. And in the base case, what you can see here is the original given array is empty, here is also empty, here it is also empty, here it is also empty, and whenever the original given array is empty, that is we have considered all the possible elements of that given original array. The given secondary array is having my one potential permutation, right? So this is going to be one of the potential permutation, this is also going to be one, this is going to be one, and so on and so forth. So what the problem says is that we can just solve this problem recursively. So if we are just solving this problem recursively, we will be having 3 steps. What will be the 3 steps? First will be the recursive intuition. So what is the recursive intuition? That, okay, just go and calculate all the possible permutations of this 2, 3. What I will do, I will append 1 ahead of or as a prefix of them. Then just go and calculate all the possible prefixes permutations of 1, 3, and I'll add 2 as a prefix, so on and so forth. What is my self work? That, okay, some task will be done by recursion, some task is going to be done by me. What I'll try to do, I will just try to generate this 2, 3, generate this 1, 3, and generate this 1, 2. Now let's see how we can do that. So let's say we have 4 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here we will have one choice for 1, one choice for 2, one choice for 3, and one choice for 4. So if we will have a choice of 1, we will go and calculate all the permutation of 2, 3, 4. Similarly, if we will have a choice of 3, we will go and calculate all the permutation of 1, 2, 4. Right? Now can you see that? Can you see that if I just denote this element with the ith index, then how we can extract 1, 2, 4? Can I say it is equal to the sub array from starting from 0 till I length appended by a sub array starting from I plus 1th index going till the end? Can you guys see that this formula will help us to generate this kind of a scenario? Let's see how. So here you can see for 3, the value of I is going to be equal to 2. So the sub-array starting from 0 of 2 length is what? 1, comma 2, appended by a sub-array starting from the index 2 plus 1, that is 3, and going till end is 4. So this leads to 1, comma 2, comma 4, right? So I'll try to generate all these let's say sub-array combinations. And one more thing I'll just pick out the contextual element, that is what element is going to make a choice, and we'll just append that in my given secondary array. What will be the base case? The base case will be when we have considered all the elements from the given input, then this secondary array will be having my final answer, right? So I hope the logic for the problem is clear to everyone, and we will meet in the next video. So thank you guys, see you next time. Hey guys, in this video we are going to discuss the problem next permutation. So what the problem says is that you are supposed to implement the next permutation function, which rearranges the numbers into numerically next greater permutation of the numbers for a given array of size n, right? So here you can see that suppose the given array is 1, 2, 3, the size is 3. The next greater permutation, or we can say the just larger permutation, is going to be 1, 3, 2. Right, there can be a lot of permutation of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, say 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 2, 2, 1, 3, and so on. But among all those permutation, after this permutation, this is the just larger permutation. Similarly, for 1, 1, 5, we can have 1, 5, 1 as the answer. So we are supposed to return this new permutation as our output. So let's see that what we can do. A brute force solution can be what? A brute force solution can be to just calculate all possible permutations and then check that which permutation is just larger than the current permutation. So we can just go and calculate all the possible permutation, store them in a particular storage, and then one by one compare the permutation calculated with the given sequence of numbers. The permutation which is having the just larger sequence of number than when compared with the original ones, we will return that permutation. So in order to generate all the permutation, we will be requiring n factorial time, and then we need to compare them. So the overall time complexity of this solution will be big O of n factorial. Let's see if we can optimize this on a bit. So let's say that in order to optimize it, what if the whole given sequence is sorted in decreasing order, just like let's say 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1, right? Suppose this is the given sequence, then what will be the next larger permutation? There can be no next permutation in this case. Why? Because this is the largest permutation that can be done for the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the largest possible permutation. And if this is the case, then obviously we cannot do anything. So no next permutation is possible here. Right, this can be one of the cases. Let's see for any general case. So let's say that for any general case, this graph depicts the given sequence. So let's suppose our sequence is depicting a graph just like the above one. Now what we can see here is the sequence starting from the number y till the end is a decreasing sequence, right? This is a decreasing sequence. And we know that we cannot do anything for a decreasing sequence because for this particular sequence, it is the largest possible one, right? So if we will just consider a sub-array starting from the element y till the last element, this is a decreasing order sequence and no just larger permutation can be done. So the best thing that we can do is start from this number x, right? That is just before the number y. So we need to make the changes from element x only. What we can do, we need to find a number z that is just larger than x, right? So we need to find a number z which is just larger than x and then swap the two numbers, right? So we can just swap the two numbers. So z will come here and x will come here. Now here you can see that we will be able to find a better permutation, but still it is not the just larger permutation. Why? Because even if we just replace x at this point of time, still this sequence is a decreasing sequence, right? Even if we just swap z and put z at the position of x and x at the position of z, still the sequence starting from the number y till the very end is still a decreasing sequence, and this is not going to be the largest the just larger sequence, right? Why this is going to happen? Let us see. So let's say that we are having a sequence like this one. So 4 is going to depict the number x, 5 is going to depict the number y which is just larger than x, and y is going to depict the number 7 because after y, starting from y and after y, everything is sorted in decreasing order. So what we'll do, we'll just swap 4 and 5, we will get this. And here you can see that if we are getting 1 comma 5 comma 8 comma 5 and some numbers here, then here you can see that if we can just fix this part 1585, we can have a lot of permutation that can be generated using 76431. Some permutations can be 67431 or 43671 or 36174. One of the permutations will be also 13467. And here you can see that among all the permutations possible, this is going to be the smallest one. That is, among all the larger permutations, that is all the largest permutations, this is going to be the smallest among all of them. That is the just larger thing that we are going to find. Now, why I am keeping this 1585 as static, as in why I am keeping this part as fixed? Because we want the just larger permutation, and among the larger permutations we want the or we can say the among the larger permutation we want the smallest one. And we can see that if we will just avoid changing the most significant number, so everything on the left part is what, a more significant part of my sequence. So if we will just avoid changing the most significant numbers of the sequence and just change the lesser significant number, that is the thing which are on the right side of my sequence, then this will be a step forward to get a smallest larger permutation, because some permutation can be what, 5 8 5 and something here, right? So obviously this will be larger than this one because the number 1 is obviously lesser than the number 5, so this sequence is always going to be larger. So we should try to avoid changing the most significant numbers. So what the whole algorithm says is that we'll just find a number x such that x is the first number from the right which is less than y, right? Where, or we can say, we are going to find a number ai which is just lesser than a of I plus 1, and this I is checked from the right side, right? As soon as we have found it, we'll just swap it. And what we'll do after this number, after this point, that is where the original x was present, we'll just reverse the rest of the sequence. That is, this sequence will be sorted in ascending order. So this will be sorted in ascending order, or we can just say we can just reverse it. Why? Because originally it was sorted in decreasing order. And then we will be able to find our just larger permutation. So we just need to make the changes from element x only. We need to find a number z which is just larger than x, then swap these two numbers, and we just reverse everything after the number, after this position where originally x was present, right? So here you can see that finding this number x takes on time, and then just reversing everything after x takes on time. So the overall time complexity for this solution is going to be big O of n. And obviously we are not taking any space, because in the original solution of brute force we were taking some space in order to store all the possible permutation. So I hope you got the logic for the problem, and we will meet in the next video. So thank you guys, see you next time.
Hi guys, in this video let's talk about the question divide integers. So basically you have to divide two integers without using the multiplication, the division and the mod operator. Okay, so you have to return the floor of the result of the division. So let's say if dividend is equal to 43 and divisor is equal to 8, then quotient is nothing but floor of dividend by divisor. So quotient is 5. Right, so we have to consider the overflow case as well. As we will move forward, we will know that how to tackle this overflow case. Okay, so let's see. So the approach one could be that we can do the repeated subtraction, right? We can do the repeated subtraction because by subtracting the divisor from the dividend until the dividend becomes less than the divider. So that's what essentially a division means, the repeated subtraction. So basically dividend will get reduced to become the remainder, and the number of times we'll subtract divisor from dividend will become the quotient. Now what do I mean by this is that so let's say here 43 is my dividend and 8 is my divisor. So I'll do 43 minus 8, I'll get 35. So then 35 minus 8, I get 27. Then 27 minus 8, I get 19. 19 minus 8, I get 11. and then 11 minus 8, I get 3. Now 3 is the dividend, right? So 3 is the dividend that I'm left with. So since 3 is less than 8, that means I can't no longer subtract it further. So the number of steps it took, these are 5. So the quotient in that case, the q here is equal to 5. The answer here is 5. So the first approach is to divide repeatedly, right? So the complexity is going to be order of dividend. So complexity is going to be order of dividend, because this could also be the case for example, if I had 1000 and this is the dividend and 2 is the divisor. So every time I'll be just reducing my dividend by 2. So 1000 minus 2, it gives me 998 and 2. Then it will be 998 minus 2, it gives me 996 comma 2, and so on. So basically this will become linear it will become of linear time complexity, right? A linear subtraction. So here the time complexity is going to be order of dividend, and the space is order of 1. So let's see if we can have an improved version of this complexity. So the approach 2 is of bit manipulation. So basically what we know is that I was continuously subtracting the divisor from the dividend every time, right? So instead of doing it just for once, so we were considering this x value to be 1, right? So instead of that, how about if we multiply it with the highest power of something, with the highest number, so that this answer, this remainder is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so this is essentially my quotient. Right? So if I'm able to divide, so I can, first of all, can I represent every number in the power of 2? Yes, I can, right? Yes, I can. So how about, so we know that each number can be expressed in power of 2, right? So let's represent quotient in power of 2. How about representing quotient in power of 2? Now what do I mean by this? So what I was doing is, I was simply subtracting the divisor from the dividend just by once. So if I'm able to find the largest power of 2, the highest power of 2, for which this problem becomes, the answer to this is greater than or equal to 0. So that means here what can I have? So I can have 2 to the power 2, right? I can have 2 to the power 2. That means nothing but I'll have 43 minus 4 into 8. So it's nothing but 43 minus 32. It gives me 11, which is greater than 0, right? So this will work. So that means how much work have I done? How many times have I subtracted it? 4 times, right? So I'll simply have this in my quotient. So I'll have 4 times, right? But further, still there is chance to subtract 8, right? There is a chance to subtract 8. So now let's do 43 minus 2 to the power, let's say 1. Let's try for this. Now 43. So now it's not 43, right? It's not 43. I'll have 11 left with me. I have 11 left with me because I have essentially subtracted 32 from 43. Now 11 is left. So now let's do 11 minus 2 to the power 1 into 8. So this will become less than 0. So I can't take 2 to the power 1. So let's try taking 11 minus 2 to the power 0 into 8. So it is 11 minus 8. Now this is greater than 0 and this is 3, right? Now since 3, that is the dividend, the reduced dividend has become less than the divisor, right? Has become the less than divisor. Therefore, so what we can do? So now we have to stop. But again we have subtracted 8 just once, right? Just once we have subtracted 8. So quotient, it will be added to quotient. So now my quotient has become 5. Now my quotient has become 5, which is actually my answer. So what I'm doing is, instead of repeatedly subtracting 8 just once, instead of repeatedly subtracting divisor from the dividend just once, we can do that in power of 2, right? We can do that in power of 2. Now one more thing I want to emphasize here, that here we are trying to get we are starting from the dividend, then we are dividend every time we are subtracting our divisor, right? Every time we are subtracting our divisor, and we are trying to do that till my answer is greater than equal to 0, my remainder is greater than equal to 0. So instead of that, how if I try to do it this way? So I have dividend is equal to 43, right? And divisor is equal to 8. So if I do 8 plus 8, so let's say I just have 8 right now. So 8 is greater than 43, right? How about if I do 8 plus 8? Then 16. 16 is also greater than 8, greater than 43. Then what about 8 plus 8 plus 8? This is nothing but 24, right? So it's again greater than 43. How about 24 plus 8? That is 32, right? So it's again greater than 43. Now I'll have 40, right? 40. It's again greater than 43. Now 48 is 40. Oh, wait a minute. These signs need to be reversed. So 8 is less than 43, then 16 is less than 43, 24 is less than 43, 32 is less than 43, 40 is less than 43. So that's why I'm moving forward, right? That's why I'm moving forward. Sorry for that mistake. Now 48 has become greater than 43, okay? 48 has become greater than 43. So I have to stop. But how many times have I done this particular thing? So I have had 8 once. So 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then 5, right? So I had 8, then I've added 8 plus 8, then I've had 3 8s, then 4 8s in this case, 32 case, then 5 8s, right? So now number of steps are 5, so my answer is 5. So instead of moving from my dividend to divisor, basically actually making the remainder 0, so basically moving from dividend to making the remainder 0, I can start from my divisor and move to dividend till that becomes, so till my dividend is lesser, right? If it becomes greater, so I'll simply stop. Now what do I mean by this? So we will get to know better with the help of this pseudocode, right? So let's see the pseudocode. So here I have the dividend and the divisor. So n is denotes here the dividend and m denotes the divisor. Okay, so n is equal to dividend and m is equal to divisor. Now if my dividend is less than 0, or my divisor is less than 0, that means either of them is 0, so I'll get this as 1. So if this becomes true, that means I'll simply have sign as -1, or it will be 1, right? Then I'll be taking absolute values because sign I have already considered. Then my q is going to be 0. Here q will be the quotient and t will be the number that I'll be adding to. Basically initially I had 8, right? So I have 8 now, right? Then I have 8 plus 8, right? So it has become 16. Then I had 8 plus 8 plus 8. So to keep track of this, I'll be having a temp variable, t variable, right? So actually the thing is that instead of doing just 8 plus having just 8, then 8 plus 8, then 8 plus 8 plus 8, so instead of doing this just for once, I can add have the highest, I can consider the highest power of 2 and then multiply it by 8. I can do that as well, right? So let's see how this will work. Okay, so I'll be iterating from 31, that is the most significant bit, to the least significant bit. So here t I have taken, it is initially 0, and so I'll be checking this condition. So basically m, which is my divisor, so here I'll be considering just for the sake of the example, I'll be considering this 43 and divisor as 8. So here I'll be shifting my divisor to I bit, right? Basically what am I doing is I'm multiplying 8. So this is left shift, right? I'm multiplying 8 by the power of 2 to the power I, right? Because I'm multiplying 8 I times by 2. So it's nothing but 2 to the power I multiplying 8 by 2 to the power I. So I'll check that if it's less than equal to this n is nothing but dividend, right? So dividend, it's 43. So here right now I is nothing but I have started from 31. So this is definitely greater, right? This is definitely greater, not less. So this will become false and I'll come out of the loop. Now I will become 30. Then again I'll come out of the loop because this will be greater than n. Then again until my I becomes 2, I'll be dropping out, right? So now if my I becomes 2, then I'll check. And then I'll see that so here my t is 0 plus m, which is 8, left shifted by 2. Here my I becomes 2. So it's nothing but 8 into 2 to the power 2, right? So 8 into 4, it's nothing but 32. So 32 is less than now 43. So I will proceed, because when my I was even so wait a minute. So yeah, so basically when my I was equal to 3, then I had 8 into 2 to the power 3, which is nothing but 8 8 is 64, right? 8 8 is 64. This is definitely greater than 43. So I can't go for I equal to 3. So from 31 till 3, this statement was getting out to be false. So I simply won't count that, right? So now for I equal to 2, it will work. So 32 is less than equal to 43. So now what I'll do, I'll have t as 0, right? I have t as 0. Now I'll be simply adding 8 left shifted by I, which is nothing but 32, right? So I'll be adding 32, because now I have started from 8. Now I have reached to 32, right? I am starting from my divisor and I am trying to reach to my dividend. Basically I am trying to reach to my dividend. So I am at 32. So t will be 32 right now. Okay, then q is nothing but I'll be adding the number of times I have added 8 with 8. So basically number of times I have processed my divisor to reach the dividend. So I have done 8 into 2 to the power 2, which is nothing but 8 into 4. So multiplying 8 by 4, that is essentially but 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, right? So I have done this. So that means how many number of times? It's 4 times. So q here is equal to 4. Okay, q here is equal to 4. Now I will become what? So let me just remove it. Now I will become nothing but 1, right? So it is reducing. Now it will become 1. So I'll get what? I'll get 8 into 2 to the power 1, which is nothing but 16, right? So I'll compare this with my n, but I'll also add t with it. So because I have already reached to 32, right, in the previous step. So now 32 plus 16, now this is greater than 43, right? So I can't process it for I equal to 1. So let's try it for I equal to 0, right? So if I equal to 0, then I'll be doing a t, which is nothing but 32 plus 8 into 2 to the power 0, right? Now 32 plus 8 is nothing but 40, right? Now this is less than 43, this is less than equal to 43. So this can happen, right? So what I'll do, I'll have t plus equal to 8 into 2 to the power 0. So t is equal to 32 plus 8, which is nothing but 40. So this is 40. And q is going to be nothing but, it's going to be 1 left shifted by, so q or 1 left shifted by I here is 0. So this is going to be nothing but, so basically I'll be adding, so basically it will become, in this case it will become 5, right? It will become 5. So q will become 5 and t will become 40, and now I can't move anymore. So this is the highest I can get, and so I'll simply now check that if my initial sign was less than 0, so then I'll simply set q to negative of 1, that is multiply q by minus 1, and if this q becomes greater than equal to int max, now see, we are checking for the case of overflow. So if q becomes greater than equal to int max, or if it becomes less than int min, so I'll simply return int max as per the question, or I'll return q, right? Or I'll return q. Now let's talk about the time complexity. So above we saw that time complexity was order of dividend. Here the time complexity we have significantly reduced it to order of log a, that is order of dividend, log of dividend, because every time we are playing with the power of 2. So we are essentially dividing our dividend by power of 2 every time, right? So if I say that I am trying to reach from my divisor to my dividend, so that also I am doing it in the power of 2, in the steps of 2, right? So it will take order of log of dividend, right? And space is order of 1. So I hope this was useful. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, let's talk about a new problem today, that is letter phone. In this problem, you will be given a digit string and you need to return all the possible letter combinations that the number could represent. Here, the mapping of digit to letters is very similar to the mapping you see on a telephone button. You must have seen the earlier phones, that is the keypad phones, which used to have different characters associated with each number, right? Here you can see a similar representation where 2 is being mapped to A, B and C, 3 is being mapped to D, E, F, 4 G, H, I, and similarly the rest of the numbers. Now you will be given a combination of numbers in the form of a string, that is a digit string like this in the given example, and you need to basically tell all the possible combinations that this number could represent, right? So for this particular number 23, I have for 2 A, B, C mapped, and for 3 I have D, E, F mapped. And for the possible combinations, I could either have, let's say, A, D, A, E, A, F, and similarly I could have B, D, B, E, B, F, and so on. So at the end, we get all these possible combinations as our answer. So for a string 2, 3, I have basically 9 combinations. Right. So I hope the question is clear to you. And also there's another constraint with the question, that you need to return all the strings all the combinations basically in a lexicographically sorted manner. Now, let's see how will we solve this problem. Now, let's say instead of 2 values in an example, let's say I have a digit string of length 3. That is basically I have a combination or a concatenation of 3 numbers. Now, let's say the numbers are 7, 5 and 6. Now you will see here for 7 I can either have P, Q, R and S. Now for 5 I can have J, K and L, and for 6 I can have M, N and O. Now you will see that for 7 I have 4 possibilities and for 5 and 6 I have 3 possibilities. Now if you remember how exactly combinations work, so let's say for the first place I can place any of these 4 characters. For second place, I can place any of these 3 characters, and for third place, I can place any of these 3 characters. That is, now can you easily calculate what will be the total number of combinations? It can be very easily calculated by multiplying 4 into 3 into 3, which is going to be 4 into 9, and the answer is going to be 36. So now by looking at the number of digit string, that is the length of the digit string, and the total possibilities for each position, I can figure out the total number of combinations. But the question is to find all those combinations and to return them in a lexicographical sorted manner. Right. Now let's think of it in terms of recursion. We know in recursion that the smaller problem works, and we assume that we will get the right solution for the smaller problem, and somehow we need to use that solution to build the solution for the bigger problem, right? Now here, let's say the bigger problem is to find out the combinations for 5, 7, 5 and 6, and let's say the combinations for the smaller problem is 56, and we already know the combinations for this, right? I know for 5 I have J, K and L, and for 6 I have M, N and O, right? So what could be some of the possible combinations? I could have JM, I could have JN, I could have JO, then I can have KM, KN, KO and similarly. Now I have the solution for 5 and 6, and somehow I need to use that solution to build the answer for 7, 5 and 6. Now I know for 7 I have P, Q, R and S. Now can you very easily observe here that by just concatenating P in front of all the combinations for 5 and 6, I can easily get the combinations for 7, 5 and 6. And I can follow the similar position for the rest of the characters as well. That is, I will get strings of the form, let's say P, JM, P, JN, P, JO, P, KM, P, KN and similar like that. Once I have concatenated P in front of all the combination of 5, 6, I will take Q and do the similar thing, right? That is, I will have J, Q, JM, Q, JN, Q, JO. Similarly like that. Again for R, I am going to follow the same thing, and for S as well. You can verify the number of combinations by another procedure, that for 5, 6, I have 3 possibilities for 5 and 3 possibilities for 6. So the total values is going to be 7. Now I have 4 possibilities for 7, and I am attaching each of those 4 possibilities one by one to all the combinations for 5 and 6. That is, P is going to be attached 9 times, Q going to be attached 9 times, similarly for R and S. And the total number of combinations is going to be 36. So this is how we are using recursion, and by using the solution of the smaller problem, building the solution for the bigger problem. Now I hope the question is clear to you. Thank you. Hello everyone. Let's discuss a new problem today, that is reverse integer. In this question you will be given an integer and you simply have to reverse it. Let's take some examples to understand that if the given number given to you is 123, that is, then you simply have to reverse the integer, and on reversing you will get 321, that is 3, 2 and 1. Also, if you are given negative numbers like this, let's say minus 123, the answer is going to be minus 321. That is, the negative value remains at its particular point only, and the rest of the number is simply reversed. Now you know that when you reverse an integer, it might be the case that the original number is in its limit, but when you reverse it, the result might go into an overflow condition, right? So the question says, to handle that condition, what you can do is, if the reversed number is greater than the integer dot maximum value, you can simply return a 0 at that point, right? Now let's see how we will actually approach this problem. What we can do is, to solve this question, we can build the reversed integer one digit at a time. Like what we can do is, and before building or let's say while building the reverse integer, we can check beforehand whether or not appending another digit would cause overflow or not, right? So this approach is actually similar to reversing a string only, and let's see what will be the algorithm. So the first, what you will do is, you will take the original number and you're basically taking off the last digit one by one from the original number, that is popping the last digit one by one from the original number and pushing it at the end of the reversed integer, right? So basically you are kinda doing the stack operations, that is the push and the pop operations. Let's see how actually we are performing these operations, and let's understand this in a more detailed manner. So at each point, you are going to get the last digit of x, that is the original number. Let's say the number was 129. So you are getting the last digit. So in the temp, in each iteration, you are first going to have 9. Then you are going to reduce the number, and then in the next you are going to get 2, and similarly you are going to get 1. And then you are taking all these last digits or the integers and simply adding them to your reverse number, right? So when you take, so let's say the number is 129 only, and the answer initially just has 9, and when you have 2 as the last digit again, so the answer keep on building at that point and becomes 92, and similarly it becomes 921. So that is how you are actually going to build the reversed integer. But important thing to consider at this point is that when you are solving this question using this, you can actually go into a overflow condition, right? You can easily go into a overflow condition, and to avoid that, you simply have to check some conditions so that you never actually go into the overflow. So the important to check whether you will go into overflow or not. So how we can do is, we can do it very easily by making some important observations, right? And let's see what these observations are. Now, if you see that I am following, or I am exactly approaching or reversing my number using this equation, then you will know that if an overflow is going to occur, then it is bound to happen that the reverse integer was greater than or equal to the maximum integer by 10 value, right? This is a very obvious observation, because if this is true, then only you are going to go into an overflow condition, right? Another way to say this particular fact is that if the reverse is greater than the integer max value by 10, then answer, and then this condition is definitely going to guarantee to go into an overflow condition, right? This is just another way of saying the first observation, right? Now you will also see that if the reverse of the number is going to be exactly equal to the integer dot max value by 10, then the overflow will only occur if the temp is actually the last digit that is popped off from the original integer, and if that value is going to be greater than 7, and if the reverse integer is going to be equal to this value, then also you are going to go into an overflow condition. How can I say this? Because the integer dot max values we know is equal to 2, 1, 4, 7, 4, 8, 3, 6, 4, 7. Then if I see that the value of temp is greater than 7, then I am going to go, and then I am bound to go into an overflow condition, right? So the question now can be very easily solved by following these two equations only. And whenever you are going to follow this equation, you simply have to just make these checks to make sure that you never go into an overflow condition. And if at any point you do go into an overflow condition, you are just simply going to return 0. Now let's consider the space and time complexity for this question. In this question, at each particular point of time, we are reducing the original number by 10. Therefore, the time complexity is going to be log of x to the base 10, and the space complexity is going to be order of 1, because we are solving this question using constant extra space. I hope you understand this question now. Thank you.
Hi guys, in this video let's talk about a problem finding the square root of integer. So given an integer n, you have to compute and return the square root of n. If n is not a perfect square, so return the floor of square root of n. And do it without using the square root function from the standard library. So the range of n is 1 from 1 to 10 to the power 9. Let's say the input is 11, so the output is 3. How? Because the square root of 11 is 3.316. Therefore, we'll take the floor of it. So, we'll get 3 as the answer. Let's see how this problem can be approached. So, one possible way is, we know that the range of our answer is going to lie from 1 to n, right? So, we can simply iterate from 1 to n. And we can check that if it's x square becomes equal to n, then we can simply return the value of x. Else, if x square is less than n, then we know that this x is one possible answer. And we'll check for higher values of x. So let's say some x plus 1, so the value just greater than x becomes greater than n, the square of it becomes greater than n. So we know the previous value did satisfy, so we will simply return the stored answer, because any x greater than this will not satisfy the condition, right? Will not be the answer. So let's see how can we optimize this problem, because this will give a time complexity of order of n, linear time complexity. Then now let's make some observation. Let's say I have some value of x. We know that it's going to range from 1 to n. Now this value could be like x square could be equal to n. In that case, we'll simply return x. But if it's less than n, then we know that the value lesser than x cannot be the answer, right? Cannot be the answer. It's quite possible that the value which is greater than x could be an answer. X or any value greater than x can be one such answer. So we can reduce our search space, and then now we can search between from x to n, right? Now the third condition is when x square is greater than n. If this is the case, then we know that any value which is greater than x cannot be the answer. That means we should look to our left. And we should also ignore this x, because x square was greater than n. So from here comes the intuition to apply binary search, because we have a search space and we have a conditions because of which we can reduce the space into half. So let's see the code for binary search. So here we will take, so if x equal to 0, we'll simply return 0, and otherwise we'll put our start to 1 and end to x, right? Now this is going to be the while loop for the binary search. We'll find the mid, so start plus n minus start by 2. This we have found our mid like this way, because this will avoid overflow, okay? And if mid is less than equal to x by mid, what this means, that if mid into mid is less than equal to x, now this could cause overflow, therefore we'll write it like this, right? So first we have reduced the value and then we are checking. So if this condition becomes true, that means x is one such possible, that means mid is one such possible answer, right? So we will simply store the answer and we'll move to right. Else, if this condition fails, then we'll move to our left. So then we'll simply return our answer. Now this particular binary search approach is going to take the complexity of order of log base to n. Let's see this with the help of an example. So here our n is equal to 10. The start is going to be 1 initially and end is going to be 10. Mid is 5. So 5 square is greater than 10, right? Therefore, we should move to our left. So end will become mid minus 1 and 1 will remain same. Start will remain same. So mid is equal to 2. Now 4 is less than 10. So we will move to our right. And start will become mid plus 1 and 4 will remain same. End will remain same. Now mid is 3. 3 square is less than 10. So what we'll do, we'll again, so basically whenever we are getting it as less than something, less than the value, so this particular number could be one possible answer. So first we have stored 2 because 2 square was less than 10. Then when we got 3 square less than 10, so we will simply store 3 now. Okay, and we will move to our right. So we will get start equal to mid plus 1. This will remain same and we will get mid as 4. Now 4 square is greater than 10. So we will simply exit the while loop and we will return the stored answer, which is 3. So that's the running of the algorithm. So thank you so much. Hi guys, in this video let's talk about the problem longest substring without repeating characters. So given a string, we have to find the length of the longest substring without repeating characters. For example, the longest substring without repeating letters for this particular string is just ABC, right? So if we look here, then this is the longest substring which is of the length 3. Therefore, we will simply return the length. Right, this is 3 for this particular string, and for the next case, which is this, so the longest substring is the single letter B, right? Because if we consider any other substring, then B and B repeats. So therefore, there is just a single letter here, and therefore we will return the length 1. So now how can we approach this problem? Let's see that. So there is a brute force solution which says that we can consider all substrings one by one and check for each substring whether it contains all unique characters or not. So the total number of substrings are n into n plus 1 by 2. And to check if a substring contains all unique characters or not, we can keep a map of the visited characters. Therefore, this step can be done in a linear time. The total time complexity of calculating all the substrings and then checking if they contain unique characters or not. So the time complexity is going to be order of n cube. Let's understand this with the help of an example. So this is the string, let's suppose A, B, C, B, E. Then what are all the substrings that can be present with the starting from A? So we can have just A, then AB, then ABC, then ABCB, then ABCB, E, right? To check if the substring have the unique characters or not, for that we can use either map or we can use a set. If we use a map, then we can have a mapping from character to integer which will store the character in a present substring and the frequency of that character, and in the set we can simply store the character only to check its occurrence. Now starting from A, we can have all these substrings. So at present we have just A, let's suppose this is the first string, and for now we are just considering a set. So A is not present, so let's put A and let's maintain a length variable. So length at present, the maximum length is just 1, right? Now let's move to the next substring, so which is AB. So right now A is not present, so let's put A into the set, okay, and B is not present, so let's put B into the set. Now the maximum length is 2. Now let's move to the next substring, so which is ABC. A is not present, let's put A into the set. B is not present, let's put B into the set. C is not present, let's put C into the set. The length, maximum length is 3 now. Let's move to the next substring now, which is ABCB. So A is not present, let's put A. B is not present, let's put B. C is not present, let's put C. Now B is present already, right? B is present. So now we even if we move further, even if we check for the next string, then we can say that if this string cannot contain the unique characters, that means string starting from this current I cannot consist of the unique characters. So that means let's check for next substrings. So let's check substring starting from B. So let's reinitialize it. So starting from B, we have just B, then BC, then BCB and BCBE, right? So for just B, we can check that okay, B is not present, so let's put it, but the maximum length is going to be 3 only. Let's check for the next substring, which is BC. So B is not present, let's put B. C is not present, let's put C. Still the maximum length is going to be 3. Now let's check for the next substring. So B is not present, let's put B over here. C is not present, let's put C over here. Now this is present, right? B is present. So what should we do? If we move even further, that will tell us that okay, it won't help us because the B is repeating. So we can move simply to the next substring starting from C. So C, CB, CBE. Likewise, we will keep on checking and we will keep on iterating till we have completely iterated this string. Right, the complexity for this is going to be order of n cube, which is pretty huge. So can we optimize it? Well, yes, let's see. So this can be further optimized if we check whether the substring consists of unique characters or not while moving the second pointer only. So what can we do? So the string is A, B, C, B, E. Right now I is at here, right? And J is also starting from here. So A is not present, let's put A into the set. So let's put A into the set. Now let's move J. Length right now is 1. So B is also not present, let's put B into the set. And now length is 2. Let's move J. C is not present, let's put C into the set. Now length is 3 and let's move J. Now B is present. So what should we do? Now we will be moving our I. So I will come over here and J will also start from here now. So B is not present, let's put B, and length will still be 3 only because that's the maximum. Right, now let's move J. C is not present, let's put C. Right, length will be same. J is not, so B, when J is incremented, it comes to B and B is already present. That means we can simply increment our I now. So I will come to this location and J will also come to this location. Right, and we will keep on iterating and keep on checking this way. So C is not present, let's put C. Right, and length will still be 3 only because that's the maximum. Let's increment J. This B is not present, let's put B. Right, now increment J. E is not present, let's increment E. Right, and the length is here is 3 and our present maximum length is also 3. So we need not update it. Now let's increment J. So now we have completely iterated over our string and therefore we can stop. And here we are checking the uniqueness of the characters in the string while iterating with jth pointer. So that will take the time complexity of order of n square, right? Now can we even optimize this further? Well, yes, we can do this function, we can do this in linear time as well. Well, let's see how. So we have A, B, C, B, E. Right. Our I is starting from here. Let's maintain a set. So we have A over here. So current maximum length is just 1. Now let's increment J. So B is not present. Let's put B and let's increment our length. Let's increment J. C is not there. Let's put C and let's increment the length. Now let's increment J. B is already present now. Since B is already present, instead of just incrementing I to one position and moving J back to ith location and restarting and checking all the substrings, can we not move J any further? Can we just do something else? Well, we have to actually make sure that B does not exist, right? So in that case, we can actually, instead of moving J back, we can increment our I till the point this jth character does not exist in the set anymore. Now what do I mean by that? Let's see. So I is incremented and this particular character now can be erased from the set as it is no more in the current window from I till j, right? So A can be erased. Now still the character at B is present in the set. So we need to increase our I further. Let's increase it and let's remove this B now. Now does this character at J is present in set? Well, no, it's not present, right? That means this B has just one occurrence now and let's put it in the set now. So we have put the B and the present length is 2, which is less than the maximum length. So we will keep this same. Let's increment J now. So J will come to this position and E is also not present. So we can put E into the set and present maximum length is 3 and the current maximum length is also 3. So we need not update it, right? And let's move our J now. So j has reached to the end of the string, and that means we have completely traversed our string, right? And that's how we know that when to stop. So instead of moving j back, we have actually incremented our I till the jth character does not exist in the set anymore, and that's how we are doing it in linear time. We are iterating over each character at most 2 times. So the complexity is 2 into n, and in bigger terms it's just order of n, right? And the space complexity is also order of n, where n is the length of the string. So thank you so much.
Hello everyone, let's talk about a new problem today, that is single number 2. What does this problem exactly says is that you will be given an array of integers, and in this particular array every element is going to appear thrice except for one element which is going to appear only once. And your task is to find that particular element which does not appear thrice. I hope the question is clear. Let's look at an example now to understand it better, right? The first array contains all these elements, right? And in this array, you will see that there is only one element, that is 4, that is appearing only once in this particular array. So for this array, for this first example input, the output is going to be 4. Now, for the second example, you will see here that in the given array, there is only one element that is appearing once, and that element is 1, and this element needs to be returned. So for this particular question, the output is going to be 1. Now, let's try to make some observation to see how we will solve this question, right? Now here, let us look at every bit position. Here, you will see that every number that appears thrice will either contribute to 3 ones or 3 zeros to that particular position, right? Also, the number that appears once, let's say that number is x, will contribute exactly 1 0 or 1 1 to that particular position, depending on whether it has 0 or 1 in that position, right? So let's take an example to understand this. Let's say the array elements are 4, 4, 4 and 2, right? So if I write the bit values of these numbers, I will get this, right? So here you will see that since 4 is occurring thrice, it is contributing to 3 ones at this particular bit position, and since 2 is occurring once, so it is only contributing 1 0 to this position. Similarly, for this next bit position as well, 3 zeros are being contributed, whereas only 1 1 is being contributed. And here 3 zeros are being contributed from the 3 fours, and 1 0 is being contributed from the number 2. So you will see that at every bit position, we will have either 3x plus 1 zeros, right? Or we will have 3x plus 1 ones, depending on the bit values of the number x, right? So these 3x, right, since every number is appearing in a multiple of 3, so this x could be any common number, right? Basically will depend on the number of, will be depending on the numbers which are occurring thrice, and this will be the factor multiplied because each number is occurring thrice, right? So we will have this factor, 3x factor, because every number is occurring thrice for the bit positions, and this one factor will come because of a number which is uniquely occurring in the array, right? So using this observation, we will solve our question, right? So let's take this example only and continue forward, right? The elements are 4, 4 and 2, right? So when I write these again, right, what I can just simply do is I can take the sum of the bit values at every position, right? I can just take the sum of the bit values at every position. When I do this here, I get 3 as my sum, right? I get 3 as my sum, and when I take its mod by 3 only, I will reduce or I will say get away from all the elements which are occurring thrice, right? I will get away from all these bits values. So when I take the mod with 3 of 3, I get a 0 here, right? Similarly, the process is followed here. When I take the sum, I get 1. I take a mod with 3, I get 1. So this bit, right, this bit which is here is presenting the bit which is actually left out, right? Because when I take the mod with 3, all the bits which are occurring thrice in a multiples of 3 are being cancelled out, and the only left bit here is 1, right? And here also, when I take the sum, I get 0, and when I take the mod with 3, I get 0 again, right? And when you get, and whatever sum or whatever, let's say, the number you get in the end is actually the number which is occurring once, right? Here I get, when I take the sum of all the bit positions and then take a mod by 3, and in the end, which is the number which is being formed is here 2, and I can simply say that this is the number which is occurring once. Now, what will be the time complexity? You will see here that since we are, let's say, we are taking n bit numbers, right? We are taking n bit numbers and we are going over each bit and calculating its sum. So the time complexity here is going to be order of n, right? And what about the space complexity? You will see here that, let's say, we are taking the only numbers or numbers up to 32 bits. So I can basically take an array. I can basically take an array of size 32 and store the bits or the sum of the bits after taking the mod at every ith index only. And since I am taking constant space of size 32, I can say that my space complexity is order of 32, which is equivalent to order of 1 only. So I am taking a constant space here to solve this question and a time complexity of order of n. Now I hope this question is clear to you. Thank you.
Hi guys, in this video let's talk about the problem trailing zeros in factorial of n. As per the problem description, we are given an integer n and we have to return the number of trailing zeros in factorial of n. So please note that your solution should be in logarithmic time complexity. As per the problem constraints, n lies between 1 to int max, and in the example input we are given n as 5. The example output is 1. Because the factorial of 5 is 120, here there is only one trailing 0. So therefore we will simply return 1. Now what is a trailing 0? So if you look at here and if you say there are 3 trailing zeros, then you are wrong. Why? Because a trailing 0 is the one which is at the rightmost end and that has no non-zero number to the right of it. So here there are only 2 trailing zeros. This will not be counted as a trailing 0. Let's see how can we approach this problem. So the brute force solution to this approach is that first we can calculate the factorial of n and then count trailing zeros in the result. So we can find the trailing zeros by repeatedly dividing the factorial by 10 till the remainder is 0. So what do we mean by that? So let's say the factorial, the n is equal to 10 and we'll do 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5 into 6 into 7 into 8 into 9 and into 10. This will give us the number as 3628800. Now to find the trailing zeros, we will simply mod it with 10 to get the last digit. So we will get 0. Now since this is 0, we will simply increment our count. Next, we will divide the number by 10 to check the next number, the next digit, that means this number. So after dividing it, we will get nothing but 362880. So that means this digit has been removed, the last digit. Now we have got this. Now in the next iteration, we will simply do the mod of it to get the last digit. We got it as 0. So again we will increment the count. Next we will divide it by 10. Right, so here we have divided it by 10. Again find the mod of it and we get a non-zero number. That means here we have to stop because we have found out all the trailing zeros, and since we have got a non-zero numbers, that means we do not care what is there at the left of it, right? So we will simply stop and return the count. And this is what written in this snippet, that we have got the factorial as 120 of 5 when n is 5. So we will run our loop till this factorial is greater than 0. So if f mod 10 is equal to 0, we will simply count it up and we will divide f by 10. And else if it's not 0, then we will simply break, because we do not care what is there on the left, and we will simply return the count. But the problem with this approach is that the above method can cause overflow for even slightly bigger numbers, as the factorial of a number is a big number. So even if the number is as small as, let's say, 22, then it's going to cause overflow, because the factorial of even a small number is so big that it is certain to cause overflow. Right, therefore this method is not the appropriate one. So what should we do now? Let's see what is a better approach. So how can we find a trailing 0 in any number? How can we do that? So when a number is multiplied by 10, we get a trailing 0. Right, so let's see 24, if it's multiplied by 10, we get 240. So here we have got a trailing 0. Just because we have multiplied it by 10. Then we have, let's say, 240, and if we multiply it by 10, we get 2400. We have got another 0 which is contributed by this 10. Right, so in 2400, if we do into 10, we will get 24,000. So another 0 which is contributed by 10. So here there is an observation to make, that a number if multiplied by 10, it will give us a trailing 0. So for example, if n is equal to 10, then we'll get this as this is the factorial of 10. So 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5 into 6 into 7 into 8 into 9 into 10. The factorial is this, and we can see that there are two zeros, the two trailing zeros. That means there must be two tens, right? There must be number of tens is equal to 2 that are contributing to two zeros. So how are we getting that? So 1 10 is here, and 1 10 is formed by the combination of 2 and 5. So if we multiply 2 and 5, we will get 110, right? So this is 110, and we will get 110 from here. So that accounts to two zeros. So this tells us that if in a number we look at the number of pairs of 2 into 5, then we will be able to count the number of trailing zeros. So if in a number we look at that how many number of 2's are there and how many number of 5's are there, then we take the smaller number, we take the smaller power of a number. Let's say 2 is x and 5 is y. So let's say y is smaller than x, then we will take the number of 5's, and that is going to be the answer. Why? Because let's see with the help of this example. So in this case, the power of 2 is 3. That means there are the 3 2's. There are number of 2's as 3. So this is 1, and 2 into 2 gives us 4. So 1, 2, 3. So there are 2 3's, and 5 is just 1, right? So 5 will pair up with a single 2 to form 10. Therefore, we will look at a lesser power from between 2 and 5, right? Now, do we really need to find the power of 2? Do we really need to find a power of 2? Well, here the observation is to be made that if we carefully look, then every second number is a multiple of 2, and every fifth number is a multiple of 5. So if we are just able to find the power of 5, then they can pair up with that many number of 2's to produce a trailing 0. So let's look above with the help of example. So in this case, every alternative number, so this is a multiple of 2, then this is a multiple of 2, 6 is a multiple of 2, 8 is a multiple of 2, then 10 is a multiple of 2. So at every second number, we are able to find the multiple of 2, which will give us the number of 2's, right? That will give us the number of 2's. And every fifth number is going to be the multiple of 5. That will contribute to a power of 5, right? That will contribute to the power of 5. So as we can see that the number of multiples of 2 are greater than number of multiples of 5, that means we are going to get more number of 2's as compared to 5. So the number of 2's are going to be greater as compared to the number of 5. So we need not calculate the power of 2. Instead, we can simply calculate the number of 5s or the power of 5. So the problem has now reduced to finding the power of 5. So this is a generalized equation, like if we want to find a power of any number, then we can apply this formula. Here our x is equal to 5. So here we are actually trying to find the power of 5, and let this be any number, the remaining number which when multiplied with the power of 5 gives us factorial n. So how can we find the power of 5, or how can we calculate the number of 5? So for that purpose, we can simply take the floor of n by 5. For example, let's say n is equal to 11. Now n by 5 gives us 2.2. The floor of 2.2 is nothing but 2. That means the factorial of n is going to have 2 zeros. If we see here, then the factorial of 11 is nothing but 3991680. So there are 2 zeros, the 2 trailing zeros. Because in 11, how many multiples of 5 are there? It's 5 and 10. So this has contributed to 1 5 and this has contributed to 1 5. Therefore, the total number of 5s are 2, and therefore the trailing zeros are 2. But we are not through yet. Why? Because what about if n is equal to 28? What will happen in that case? So if n is equal to 28, so in 28 factorial, what are the multiples of 5? So the multiples of 5 are 5 itself, then 10, 15, 20 and 25. 5 will contribute to 1 0, 5 will contribute to 1 5, then 10 will contribute to another 5, 15 another 5, 20 will also contribute to 1 5, but here 25 is going to contribute to 2 5s. So by taking floor of n by 5 with the formula n by 5 and taking floor of it, we'll get 1 5, right? So if we do n by 5, that means 28 by 5. This is going to give us 5 only, right? So that means here we are going to get just 5 zeros. But here we can see that there are 6 zeros in total. So for getting the left out 5, that means the 5 which is still to be counted, we'll have to divide it by next power of 5, which is 25. So now we actually have to calculate the power of 25. But now what about 128? So in that case, we'll get 125 as well in the multiples of 128 factorial, the multiples of 5 in 128 factorial. So it's going to be 5, 10, 15, then 20, 25, 30 and so on, then 125 as well, right? So 125 has 3 number of 5s. So after dividing by 5 and then by 25, we'll still be left with one more 5. So for that, we'll have to divide it with the next power of 5, which is 125, to actually get the third 5. Now the formula has become, so the count of number of 5s in prime factors of n factorial, it's equal to floor of n by 5 plus floor of n by 25 plus the floor of n by 125 and so on till the number is greater than n by power of 5. So the time complexity of this approach is going to be order of log base 5n. What was the question? That we have to find a logarithmic time complexity, and we have actually achieved that. So why? Because we are incrementally dividing n by powers of 5. So first we are dividing n by 5, then n by 25, then n by 125, so on till n by 5 to the power k, which reduces to 1, and n by 5 to the power k is equal to 1. So n is equal to 5 to the power k. After taking log both sides, we will get k as log base 5n. That means log base 5n number of steps we have to take to get the solution, and therefore the time complexity is going to be order of log base 5n. So this was it. Thank you so much. Hi guys, in this video let's talk about the problem anagrams. So given an array of strings, you have to return all groups of strings that are anagrams. Represent a group by a list of integers representing the index in the original list. Let's look at this sample case for clarification. So an anagram is a word, a phrase or name formed by rearranging the letters of another. For example, spar and rasp. Both are anagrams because they have same set of characters, the frequency of characters are same, but only the order is different, right? Also note that all input characters, all inputs will be in the lower case. So for example, the input is cat, dog, god and TCA. So you have to return 1, 4 and 2, 3. So basically we have cat over here, then dog, then god and TCA. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. So cat and TCA, they are anagrams because they have same set of characters. Even the frequency is same, but the order is different. Right. So we have taken them together. That means 1 and 4 are together. Likewise, dog and god, they both are anagrams because again the characters are same, the frequency is same, but the order is different. So 2 and 3 are anagrams. So we have to basically return the answer like this. Now here in the explanation it's written that cat and TC are anagrams which correspond to index 1 and 4. Dog and god are another set of anagrams which correspond to index 2 and 3. So the indices are 1 based. The first element has index 1 instead of 0. Right. So let's see how can we approach this problem. So the solution approach is that we can sort the given strings. Now how does this intuition came? So basically from the question itself, it said that anagrams are the words that have different order of the same set of characters. So if we sort both the strings, then if those strings become equal, that means they are anagrams. Right, because the order was different only, but they have same characters. So if we sort them, then the strings which are anagrams will become equal. And after that, we can simply group them together. Right. So here we have got the input as act, DGO, DGO and act. So we have actually got them by sorting the individual strings given in the input. So ACT represents cat, DGO represents dog and DGO again represents god and ACT represents TCA. Right, so we have basically sorted them. Now we know that a group of anagrams can be represented by a key, which is nothing but the string we get after sorting characters present in those strings. Right, so here both cat and TCA are anagrams and they can be represented by a string which is ACT. So this we have got after sorting the characters present in them. So now to group the strings basically we can perform hashing. So how can we do that? So a key can be the string, right? This unique string. Here the group of anagram is cat and TCA, right? So we can have a unique string for them which is ACT. Likewise for dog and god we can have a unique string as DGO. So we can have a string and then we can have value as vector of int because we have to basically keep track of the indices of the anagrams, right? So now we will simply iterate over this array, the sorted array. So here we have, so first we are at act, then act is not present in our map. So let's put the string and the index present is 1. So let's put it in the vector. Right, now we are at DGO, right? So DGO is also not present in the map. So let's put it in the map and the frequency and the index present is 2. So let's put it in the vector. Now let's move ahead. So DGO is again there. So index, so DGO is already present in the map. Now let's include the index, right? So we have included 3. Now we are at the 4th position and act is already present in the map. So let's simply include the index. So here we have the set of anagrams represented by their indices. Now the only task is which is left, that is to iterate over them and store it in the vector, right? So here we have vector 1 and 4 and we have a vector 2 and 3. So we will push them into a vector and we will simply return this in our answer, right? Also, we will only put the vector in this resultant vector which have a size of greater than 1, right? If a string has size of just, so if the vector has size of just 1, then that means there is no anagram present for that particular string, so we can simply ignore that, right? The time complexity of this approach is going to be, so now for the time complexity, let's look at how we are going to sort the strings. So for sorting the string, basically we can perform counting sort. We are able to perform counting sort because here the range of characters is fixed, right, which is 26. So we have 26 characters and therefore the complexity is going to be order of n into k, where n is the number of strings and k represents the length of the longest string. So the time complexity turns out to be order of n into k. Now, if we don't want to sort the strings up, then we have another approach as well. So we can actually maintain a frequency array, right? Now, what is a frequency array? So let's suppose we have this as a string. So to form a frequency array of this, so we will have a character set. We will have an array of 26 characters which have a range from 0 to 225. So why 26? Because we are in the input we are given that only lowercase alphabets will be there, right? So we maintain a frequency array of size 26. Now basically we will be mapping small a to index 0, then small b to index 1 and so on, and we will be representing small z by index 25. So basically here we will be storing the frequency of all the characters. So frequency of 0 denotes that it is the frequency of character A and so on. Here the frequency of A is nothing but 1. So we will put 1 over here. Then frequency, so basically we will be iterating over the string. So let's do that. So here B is there and frequency of B is nothing but 1. So at index 1 we will put 1. Now B is nothing but only 1. So let's put 1 at index 3, right? Then A is there, so let's put 1 at index 0. Then C is there, so let's put 1 at index 2. And E is there, so let's put 1 at index 4. Initially all will be initialized to 0. So here's how we have built this frequency array, and likewise we can do for this string as well. And if the frequency array of both these strings come out to be equal, that means they are anagrams of each other. And likewise we can check this for all the strings given in the array. So for this purpose we can basically have a map where the key can be, instead of string, it can be the vector of it. So here it represents the frequency array. The strings having the same frequency array will be pushed to the corresponding vector. So let's see how we will maintain this. So here we have cat, right? So the frequency of frequency array for cat will look something like this. So here in this will be the key, right? So since this was not present, so first we will be pushing it, right? And then we will be placing this 1 over here. Then we will be moving on to dog, and frequency array of this will look something like this. And we will simply put 2 over here, right? Then we will move on to God, right? The frequency array of God will look something like this. So we will put 3 over here, right? And for TCA, the frequency array will look something like this. So we will put 4 over here. So that's how we can do it, and then the last thing left will be to simply iterate this like we did previously and return the answer. The time complexity for this approach is going to be, so for creating frequency array for a string, it's going to be order of k, where k is the length of the string, and the total time complexity will be order of n into k, where n is the number of the strings, so it's going to be order of n into k. So this was it. Thank you so much.